Meeting to order. Special call meeting of the Carrollton-Farmers Branch ISD Board of Trustees to order at 6:02 p.m. on November 11th, 2021. For the record, board members present are Tara Arbache, Sally Derrick, Randy Shackman, Guillermo Ramos, Sandra Hatfield, and myself, Les Black. I'd like to welcome everyone here. Thank you for being here. And just before we move on, I want to say for the board that we appreciate all the service of veterans today, all those who have been in service of our country. And we remember you and we thank you for your service today. I don't know if there's anyone in the room, but if there is, we like to recognize you. Anyway, thank you for your service. So our next item is audience for guests. This is agenda item 2. Anyone wishing to speak either as an individual or as a representative of a group may do so during this agenda item. Per board policy BD local, comments will only be accepted for items that are posted on the agenda tonight. So Ms. Castagnon, do we have anyone? No one speaking tonight. So that brings us to agenda item number 3, which is discussion of our equity audit executive summary. So I will turn it over to Dr. West.
Very good. Tonight we have with us Andrew Mackshiner, and he is here on behalf of a whole group of folks that visited CFB ISD in order to do an audit. So he's going to share some information with you that they put together from that audit. So thank you so much for flying in and flying out tonight. He's doing this all in one fell swoop.
That's right.
So thank you, Andrew.
Absolutely. Yeah. Good evening. How's everyone doing?
Right, good.
Excellent. Well, I will let you keep eating and get to it here. It is good to be here. It is good to support you all in doing this work. And one thing we do with these audits, and we do these across a number of different districts, I'll talk about that a little more in a second, but y'all are the experts, right? Many of you grew up and potentially went to school in Carrollton-Farmers Branch. We are under no illusion that we have answers or are here to impose any answers on you. We can simply show you the results of the assessment and the data and let you take those conclusions and run with it, right? So that's just the spirit and the stance that we bring, and want to make that clear. You will get a copy, you have a copy of this PowerPoint, or many of you do. You will get a copy of the executive summary, which this is based on, right after this presentation. So everything you see here, you'll have a copy of. I want to start by just saying, we've done a couple of these audits primarily in the Houston area with Houston ISD, Cypress Fairbanks, and a couple districts over there. But y'all are still one of only maybe 8 to 10 districts in the state of Texas that have undertaken this equity assessment or equity audit process, right? And before we even get rolling, that's really worth acknowledging that that's a very significant step, right? Particularly in this climate where there is increased attention to these things. It is a really significant step. It is worth celebrating, and I think puts you all in a great position to move this work forward in the years to come. So with that, I'll start with just one number and one image, and I added this today. This is not in your PowerPoint, but I promise pretty straightforward. So the first number in terms of context is 33.8%. Again, it's not in your slides, but 33.8% represents how much more diverse Carrollton-Farmers Branch is now than it was 20 years ago, right? So think about that, almost 34% more diverse. I'm talking about the student population, right? The student demographics are 34% ethnically, racially more diverse than they were 20 years ago, right? That's a pretty significant change. It's a change that's happening across many districts in the country and in the state of Texas. It's not just the Carrollton-Farmers Branch situation or reality. And particularly in a district that proudly and rightfully so, says together we rise, that together, and who's a part of that together, looks significantly different than it did 20 years ago, right? And we can't go into this audit, we can't make sense of some of these things if we don't have some of that foundational context and just have that in mind. And so I would then transition just to say, you already have, right, the other piece of context, an Equality and Equity Task Force or team. You are starting to take steps, and we hope this kind of helps you take one more step or gives you a guide for some potential steps you can take in the future, acknowledging that y'all are the experts and that you are the ones who are in the best position to move this work forward here. Let's go the reverse direction. There we go. So just a quick little bit on the process. We initiated this process going back to last spring. And the first thing we did was a desk audit over the summer, looking at pretty much any material, any data, any policy, any curricula that we could get our hands on from Dr. West and others. We also use TEA data from the state level around a variety of indicators that we'll get into here in a second. We then use stakeholder surveys, so those are secondary students who took the surveys, as well as staff and educators who took those surveys. We'll talk about how many in just a second. We then did stakeholder focus groups interviews and also walked through schools in late September. We went to 10 different schools, elementary, middle, and high, as well as spent the better part of a day in the central office, just interviewing people, conducting focus groups, and collecting data. And now we've created a final equity audit, step 4 there, and the executive summary that this presentation is based on this evening. So how many folks? This gives you an idea of roughly how many. Over 300 staff interviewed in person when we were here in September through focus groups at schools and the central office. Over 150 students interviewed. And then the surveys, roughly 550 staff and roughly 6,780 secondary students, right? So that just gives you an idea of who's behind these stories, where is this data coming from. Obviously, that's not everyone in the district at either level, but it is a significant amount of students and staff. And one thing we think about, and if you spend any time in academia or research, is triangulation, right? So pulling from multiple data sources to construct a more comprehensive, more detailed story and kind of test out your theories. And so just giving you a little bit of the idea behind the assessment and what drives that kind of the foundation of the findings that we're about to jump into, all right? So with that, we'll talk about a couple commendations, and there were many, many things that teachers, administrators, others were really excited to talk about when it comes to equality, equity, diversity, and inclusion. Teachers really sang the praises of a lot of the content support, specifically content-based PD and training or coaching, right? Follow-up coaching, right? Was a large strength. So teachers, and I'm just going to give you a couple quotes that are not there, but for a little bit of flavor. Quote, "The district-led trainings are very informative." Or another teacher said, "The professional development opportunities are the greatest strength." A third teacher said, "The greatest strength in my district is growing professional development that is offered for teachers who are wanting more growth in their field," right? So really a resounding strength. School administration, overwhelmingly educators and others really respect, admire the school administrators, right? Your building leaders, your principals at the school level. Wraparound services and supports. There's clearly a mindset and an awareness about wraparound services and supports for students, and that really came through in a lot of the focus groups, interviews, and surveys. So a couple teachers said things like, quote, "The district offers a wide variety of specialized programs and academies," right? Another teacher said, one of the district's greatest strengths is being aware of the needs of children outside of the classroom, right? So I'm paraphrasing and moving through this rather quickly, but you have these quotes in the executive summary, just trying to give you a flavor for what's behind these things. And then the final one is a culture of mutual support among teachers and staff, having each other's back, going the extra mile, and supporting one another. A teacher summed it up when asked, what's the district's greatest strength? A teacher said, quote, "The feeling of community and the care we have for one another and the students," right? So all of these are really beautiful strengths, things that you probably are aware of or reminded of tonight. I'll flag the first two, the content-based PD and the school administrators. We'll come back to those two because those are really key levers or really key opportunities for leveraging in your equity work moving forward. If your principals and school administrators aren't on board with equity work and aren't willing to be equity champions, it's hard to move this work forward, right? And you have great administrators, so we'll come back to that. Think about how do we leverage and build on that. Same thing with this infrastructure you have for PD and coaching around content. There is equity development that needs to happen in the coming years, and Dr. McLeod and others are taking up that mantle and moving it forward. But again, how can we use the infrastructure and the really thoughtful PD and coaching that you all have and bring that over to some of these conversations and some of these practices around equity and equality. So 4 commendations, again, these came from hundreds of students or thousands of students and hundreds of staff in the district. With that, we'll kind of transition, and I just want to acknowledge I am moving fast. I was told I have 20 minutes, and I'm a man who appreciates time, so I will get it in 20 minutes, but again, you'll get a copy of this later this evening. So I will acknowledge the next slide is going to be a little overwhelming, but we're going to get into the data. You've probably seen a lot of this. This one's the biggest at most data, so I apologize prematurely or in advance, but here's student achievement data. I'll give you a second to just look at it, either on your table or up there. The rest will be bigger and have less numbers, I promise. So on this table, I want to draw your attention to a couple of different data points. If you're looking at the first two rows, so 5th grade reading and 5th grade math, and you track over to special education, the far right column, you can start to see some pretty severe or significant differences in average achievement among different subpopulations, right? So as early as 5th grade reading and math, we start to see students with special education, students in special education or students with disabilities falling behind and not achieving, not nearly at the rate of their peers in other subpopulations, right? And so, when we point these things out, there is no judgment, there is no answer on our end, but what we do want to point out is that there are some significant, and y'all, again, this probably is not the first time, or hopefully not the first time you're seeing this data, some significant differences in achievement, right? We are not here to judge, we're not here to prognosticate, but we are here to say that one, we are a data-driven district, and we need to look at the data, here's what the data tells us, and then move forward with the plan from there. And so just for a little more context, this is based on the last reliable and consistent data we have, which unfortunately is the 2018-2019 school year. So caveat there, these are dated, but it's the last, again, reliable and consistent set of data we have from an entire uninterrupted school year. If you move on down to 5th grade math, 8th grade reading and 8th grade math there, you can see in looking at the Hispanic subpopulation and the Black or African American subpopulation, again, some pretty significant differences in achievement levels, right? And so, get to it here. We can see, for example, there's a 32% difference between Hispanic students in Carrollton-Farmers branch on that 8th grade reading and their white peers in Carrollton-Farmers branch, right? If we move down to 8th grade math, we can see there's a 40% difference there in achievement between Black or African American students here in the district and their white peers or white counterparts, right? So again, you can read most of this, you can process some of this. The last one I'll call out for you is if you follow all the way down to AP participation rate, not surprisingly, given some of these differences in outcomes, we see significant differences between, for example, our Black African American students and our economically disadvantaged students compared to our white and Asian students here in the district, all right? So again, probably not the first time you've seen these, but these kind of give us an idea or a snapshot of where we are at, disaggregated by some but not all student populations. And obviously we could do something similar with gender. We could do something similar with language or nationality for some of our immigrant students, but this gives you the beginning of a snapshot. And those percentages for 5th and 8th grade, those are based on students who met or exceeded. So depending on how the district defines proficient, but students who meet or exceed the state standard in 5th and 8th grade math and reading. All right, so meet or exceeds is what you see rolled up into those percentages. So we will move to discipline, and like I promised, a little bit less going on here. I'll give you a second to look at it. Pretty simple, and y'all can see it, but Black students are 17% of the school district, but are 30 to 31% of the students who are suspended, so almost double their rate of the student population here in the district. I know that's probably not the first time you've seen that or heard that, but when we talk about a data-driven approach or data-driven analysis, this is what the data is telling us in terms of who is disciplined at what frequency, and you can see in-school suspensions and obviously out-of-school suspensions. Not much of a difference there in terms of the percentage. All right. We know that if students are not in class or not in school, they are not going to be learning as much. They are not going to be developing the social and emotional skills from being around their peers and their teacher if they are not in the classroom. So when we think back to the previous slide and some of the achievement differences or differences in outcomes, we can tie a direct connection between the discipline data in some ways and the achievement data, right? Who is missing school or is out of class most often? How are they doing achievement-wise? And we can see in this case, African American students and Hispanic Latino students are out of the classroom most often and are not in some cases performing as well as other peer students in the district. The last snapshot, and again, just want to acknowledge I'm moving quickly. The last snapshot, staff demographics. Give you a chance to just kind of look at it here briefly. Particularly for our Hispanic and our Asian students, right? They oftentimes don't have teachers, administrators, or central office leadership that look like them, right? That reflect their culture, that reflect their ethnicity, that potentially come from their community, right? And that's not to say that we all need to be the same race or gender or have the same religion as somebody to teach them. That's obviously not the point, right? The point is that we all know what it feels like to have a role model, right, who shares certain aspects of our identity or experience, and because of that bond and because we can relate with them and they can understand where we're coming from and maybe some of those things we're experiencing, we potentially can learn better from them, right? And the academic literature from Johns Hopkins, from Cal Berkeley, and other places backs this up, that even for a black student between first grade or kindergarten and ninth grade, the presence of a single black teacher for that black student increases their chances of graduating and significantly decreases their chances of dropping out. So just the presence of one same race teacher for African American and black students can have a very transformative impact. Here in Carrollton-Farmers branch, we see particularly with Hispanic Latino students, our leadership, our teachers, our educators just don't share that identity very often, right? It is kind of hard to sugarcoat that from looking at the data. Similar or same with some of our Asian and or Pacific Islander students as well. So again, I know I'm not the first to bring these up or raise these, but there are some significant differences here. And it's both kind of that feeling of seeing people who look like you, of having role models who come from your background or your culture or share your heritage, as well as actually the research that does back this up in terms of longitudinal studies of student achievement across many outcomes over the course of their academic career trajectory. All right. So a couple opportunities for growth. And again, I'm moving at light speed. You'll get a copy of this. The first one is an increasing awareness of inequities, right? So teachers called this out in a variety of ways. One teacher used this phrase, awareness of inequalities, when asked for the district's greatest weakness, right? So I'm borrowing this language from them. But the awareness and conversation about these things is something that many teachers are asking for more conversation about. They're asking for more public leadership from the district on. And they see in their school, right? You have probably 20 to 30 teachers just in the survey say, our administration, our leadership in the building looks nothing like our students, right? Your teachers see these things on a daily basis, and we're pretty quick and frequent to call them out. That's a part of the work that y'all are already engaged in, that the Equality and Equity Task Force is already moving forward with. And I think you're well positioned to kind of make this a more consistent or deliberate part of the conversation. I think you have many educators who are excited to meet you there, right? And will step up and want to take this conversation and this work on. The largest area for growth and kind of most substantive is instructional equity, and by that we mean two things, both culturally relevant teaching, right, and support for students with disabilities or special education. So many district documents, including curriculum documents, talk about culturally relevant teaching or culturally, what's the other R word besides relevant? Responsive, thank you. I'll use them synonymously. Many district documents talk about that. The importance of that is clearly something you value. Teachers are asking for more in both of these areas specifically, and want to meet the district there and want more support. So just a couple quotes. When asked like, what is one of the biggest challenges facing the district, a teacher summed it up, staff development on cultural issues, right? Another teacher said, quote, working in culturally responsive teaching and culturally responsive discipline, right? So these are our educators or staff in the district calling these things out around culturally relevant teaching. With regard to special education, teachers were a little more specific in that they said, we just need to hire more classroom teachers to support students with disabilities, or more sped programs to cater to the needs of students with cognitive disabilities, right? And so obviously there are many legal things that you all are already doing. You care very much for special education students. This is not calling that into question at all. This is saying that many educators across the district are asking for a little more attention there and for thinking about things like the ratio of students to teachers in special education or inclusion settings, as well as resources, training, and then potentially more SPED programs for students with different cognitive disabilities. All right. And so then the last thing is district equity leadership. So educators, staff looking for the district to lead on these things. Staff and educators specifically called out hiring practices, right? They know these disparities or these differences in terms of teachers and administrators and then central office or central district leaders. They know those things and they were quick to call them out in the survey and focus groups. So modeling equitable practices, hiring practices being an example of that. Communicating and following through with a sustained equity plan or roadmap, and we'll talk about that. Many of them mentioned even initial PD with Dr. McLeod and others, but generally described it as, quote, surface level or one and done or 2 PDs and done. And so I think they're looking for a little bit more of a sustained approach. And many teachers, I won't say all, but many teachers are hungry for that and ready for that. All right, so these are kind of the 3 buckets. That second one, probably the most substantive or the most there, but when we took all the data we had, all the interviews, all the focus groups, these were the 3 buckets that things sorted themselves out into. So the recommendations, fairly straightforward, and I think y'all are well positioned for these. The first one is just articulating and clarifying equity or equality work here in Carrollton-Farmers branch. And y'all have an equality and equity task force going. I think it's their work and the work of others to determine what a long-term plan or roadmap looks like. I think teachers on all fronts are tired of we do it for a year or 2 and then there's a new flavor and a new flavor and a new thing. And I think they're hungry for a sustained, slightly longer term plan here in terms of what this work looks like. And the other piece then, not surprisingly, that complements that is around instructional equity. And this is, I think, a lot of the work that will take more than a year or more than a single person by a long ways, but it is truly a continuum of support, right? So a lot of times we think of professional development, great, we did the PD, they heard from so-and-so, done, right? Teachers and staff and administrators also called out follow-up support, like what does modeling and coaching look like around these conversations and classroom practices. Some called out what they perceived as necessary changes to the curriculum to make it more representative of different cultures and the students that are in their classrooms. And then that may include, right, and this is where y'all get to decide these things, what does it look like in terms of making sure that culturally relevant teaching is a part of, and instructional equity is a part of instructional frameworks and instructional practices. And obviously that's a bigger, longer term thing. But first, that plan or roadmap, and then second, truly a continuum, a suite of things. We know with any large district, any kind of educational change effort or endeavor, it is not done in a year, it is not done in 3 professional development sessions, it is a coordinated, long-term, and sustained thing. So these would be the 2 recommendations, not probably earth-shattering in any way. We think you all are obviously equipped to move forward on these things. They reflect the areas of kind of opportunity identified in the report that are connected to the data. And that brings us to the last slide, which is, okay, what are the next steps then? In the immediate term would be to review the executive summary. You'll get a copy of that this evening. To continue the work with Dr. McLeod and her organization, Creative Energy, right, which is a partnership that y'all are, I think this will be the 2nd year that you're working with her and another year or 2 in the works. Continue to coordinate work with the District Equality and Equity Task Force and move forward there. And with that task force in mind, begin to develop a plan or roadmap for laying out this work. So I think I'm maybe 22, 23 minutes, but I hope I covered it. You'll get that copy. I appreciate you letting us be here. Again, there are less than 10 districts, if I leave you with anything, less than 10 districts in the state of Texas that have undergone this process, have opened themselves up to this process from us or others, not that we're the only ones that can do it. And so this is a really significant step, and it's an important step. And I applaud y'all for doing it. We applaud y'all for doing it. We'll be in touch and wish you the best of luck as you move the work forward.
Okay, we just have a couple of minutes. Board members, do you have any questions or comments regarding the presentation? Mr. Sheck.
Question on the interviews and surveys, as I did, 110 staff, 550. Is that 550 different staff, or could they be in both?
They could have been in both. We were given the 10 schools by folks on your end who were coordinating, and we did see elementary, middle, and high, but there is definitely some overlap in those populations.
Okay. Yep. Any other questions, comments?
I got a comment. I'm sorry, you were limited to 20 minutes?
You all have other important business this evening.
I'm sorry, but as the only minority on the Board of Trustees to limit this right here to 20 minutes, I find offensive. I find this very, very offensive. I want another meeting. I want him to come back where we have plenty of time to discuss this as a board, as we should. That's it.
We can take a couple minutes.
We can.
We can have some more time. I know you want, it should be on another board
Nope,
meeting.
we'll have another board meeting on it.
Okay, all right. Okay. Anyone else have anything? Okay, hearing nothing, we will move to agenda item number 4, which is closed meeting is authorized under Texas Government Code, including but not limited to section 551.071, consultation with attorney, 551.072, real property, 551.074, personnel matters, 551.076, security devices, 551.082, school children, district employees, disciplinary matter or complaint, 551.0821, personally identifiable student information, and 551.084, investigation. So we'll move to item 4A, pursuant to Texas Government Code, section 551.074, interviews with potential candidates for filling board vacancy. And 4B, pursuant to Texas Government Code, section 551.074, consider and discuss potential candidates for filling board vacancy. The board will now go into closed session in this room. Staff and audience members are excused at this time. The time is now 6:29. We are back in open session. The time is now 7:58 p.m. And we are on to item number 6 on our agenda, which is discussion of development of focus measures. And at this point, I'll turn it over to Dr. Chapman.
Yes, sir. Thank you. So, at the October 14th board meeting, we, Board of Trustees and the Cabinet developed some focus measures for the 22-23 school year. And so, Dr. Black and I have discussed this a number of times, looked at, some templates. So one of the pieces that we have to also note is that under the commissioner's rule, that we have to fill out what's called the commissioner's appraisal. Now, in that commissioner's appraisal, which you can see the copy in front of you, this is actually the superintendent evaluation instrument from TASB. It has 3 parts to it. The first part is information, ratings, etc. Again, if this is part of your local evaluation or it's not part of your local evaluation, it still must be filled out by each superintendent every year. We've filled it out every year, given it to Ms. Klein, etc. So what we're talking about is the 3 parts might fit in well with the conversations that we had on October 14th. So with that being said, you can look at, it has all the information from campuses, information, page 3, go to page 4, it has closing the gap, which is vital to any school district, including our own. As you've seen recent data, we need to do that. Participation rates, that is important to TEA and the state. How many of ours are participating? The summary of the current year results, that is our STAR results. You see more STAR data, meets level, above level. You see masters, and that's all broken down. Now, in a normal year, and these are our actual numbers, we've already filled this out. In our normal year, you have pluses and minuses. Did we go up or did we go down? Well, again, there is no benchmark data for this. And so even when I fill this out today and have it, we're not having any pluses or minuses. There's nothing to base that on other than back in 18-19 school year. And we're going to be moving to STAR 2.0, as Dr. Parker had mentioned. So there's not going to be really, there might be for 22, 23, you can do a plus and minus, but then it starts all over again. And so there won't be any plus and minuses again for a year, just like we had 7, 8 years ago. But regardless, this is the information, the data, without any pluses or minuses in it. You go to the next one, and then, very important, academic growth rate. This may look similar to you in part of our House Bill 3 goals and the information that we are looking at that's required by law in that process. So that's the information. It's all going to be put on paper. You're going to have that in front of you, as well as where we are in our strengths and our areas of need. And this will be stuff that we, as the cabinet, would then fill out. The Board of Trustees can fill it out, but we will fill that out just so you'll know here's where our weaknesses are, here's where our strengths are, and this is how we need to move forward. And then you get to the last one, which is step 6, and that's the goal setting, and that's where the superintendent, it says superintendent board, but we had our cabinet, which I think is outstanding, and it has the information that was presented from you guys when we did the stickers, and Dr. Black was able to put some words together that align to such, and so we put that in this section.
And I'd add, that's just, what I put down there is just a starting point
Yeah,
for you guys to look at and play with, and so, and that's the blue, with what's in blue on the back page here.
But it all relates, this all goes back to CV 2030, it relates to your DIP in these goal-setting items.
And that was always our intent, right? I mean, from before, we were on a kind of a temporary situation until we got
Yep.
CV to everything and the district, the HB3,
Yep.
and that we were gonna go to more of
And then we got
a measure,
COVID out.
and then we got, yeah.
Yeah, because that was in
That's
April
what it was.
2020, and we were closed when we actually had that meeting, and we were gonna postpone it, things was gonna go away in a month.
Yeah.
And 2 years later. So we are back on where we were saying we were going. You would every year have some focused measures that we would put in that then the Board of Trustees can measure, and then we can put these into a dashboard. Then that can even go into potentially the quarterly reports if we want to, however that needs to look. But this is that normal template. This does keep the district, keeps the superintendent, keeps the cabinet focused, because, what are we here for? Academics, closing the gap, increases, growth measures, etc., plus the things that the board and cabinet thought that we should really focus on for 22-23.
So, Dr. Chapman, what's not in your document though is, or at least I'm not seeing, is the part 3 piece.
Yeah, for the House Bill 3 goals. So
This other management responsibilities piece. So that would be the part, where it's district management, board and community relations. That kind of thing.
yes. Oh, sorry. Yeah. So if we wanted,
You may not have intended to talk about that tonight. I don't know.
Well, wasn't, but we can.
Is
We
it
can.
okay?
Yeah. We can.
So,
So what we've done, okay, I may not have it. Did y'all give me those? They must be over there. Where are they? So we're still, this was, if you're gonna go with the commissioner's evaluation, that would be your evaluation. So what we were doing is talking through this, and there's 3 parts of this. And the first one is the educational leadership, the district management, and then the board community relations. And so what the cabinet has done is they started working through what they feel, they feel would be some of the pieces that would be the greatest focus. So you can look on the part 3 under the assessment and ongoing responsibilities. Dr. West, Tracy Smith, Michelle Bailey, Joe Gillen, and the whole team, I don't know why I started naming people. They started to write out part of CV 2030. Here are some of our focus groups. Here's our actions, and here's going to be the measurables that we're going to have through that process. In the educational leadership, this is your House Bill 3 goals. Okay? So this is what the board already has. Obviously, we know we are going and changing measures. We're gonna have to reset the measures even in 23 whenever the new STAR 2.0 comes into place. But this information you already have. This information already exists. The part that doesn't exist, if you flip to the next page, the page 3, and you look under district management. And so we started to really put our heads together because we know the importance of several items. One is you've got a goal, facilities and operations. And so Malcolm and his team put some bullets together. Again, these are just drafts of information that is pertinent as we continue to move forward. Steve Bassett, Larry, came in on B, put financial management, put in what 3 pieces were that they felt was important. If you look under each of those, so if I look, A doesn't have it for some reason, but if you look under B, it says financial management, the superintendent manages da-da-da-da-da-da, that comes from the commissioner's evaluation. That is not the words that we made up. At the very top where it says district management, the superintendent demonstrates effective planning, so on, that actually comes from the commissioner's evaluation. And then C, Mr. Mersch and Dr. Davis, again, words were already there. They put in the bullet points that they feel, which ties into retention, ties into a number of things, diversity amongst staff, etc. And so they created these items on what their focuses are going to be. If you go to the last one, which is the board and the communication relations, same thing. That language was there, A, board relations, and all of that actually comes directly from the commissioner's evaluation. And then, yes, sir.
No, go ahead. I'm sorry.
And then you go to B, community relations, and those bullets were all that Dawn Purnell and her team put together just as drafts if the board wanted to add those 3 components to it as the part 3 of the evaluation.
So, just for clarity's sake, so that nobody gets confused, all this discussion is for what we would like to get. We'd like to get something put in place by January for 2022, right? So to make the whole process more measurable, more objective, and more aligned to the things that we talked about in that meeting. And so, yeah, what the superintendent is explaining or going through is, it really is, if you look at the TASB website and pull up their templates, their sample templates, you're pretty much following the shell of that. And so there's 3 parts to it, as you said. And the first part is the data table, the commissioner's piece. The second part is our measurable goals, and those would be the little areas. We identified 4 areas if you can include the House bill goals, but since that superintendent's thing covers all those so thoroughly, we could probably delete that and just have the 3 as he's shown on the document that he's given you. And then there's just, the last little bit, which would replace the evaluation instrument that you've been using. And so this is a starting point to get everybody's feedback, because we're supposed to be doing this collaboratively with the superintendent and the board as a whole. But we want to have something in writing and something on paper just as a beginning point. Because if we didn't, we felt like we'd just come in and kind of flail around.
And know that in this evaluation is not only mine, but it's the 13 cabinet members' evaluation too. So anywhere it'll say superintendent, we cross it out, we put associate superintendent of, we put CFO, you can fill in the blank. And so all 13 people have the exact same evaluation.
And so if you look at the template that's on TASB, you'll see district management as being one of the sort of the domains. And it has, within that, it has A, B and C, 3 sort of subdomains: facilities and operations management, fiscal management, and human resource management. And there's a target statement for each one, and then a list of bullets. It'll say the board may want to see, and a list of bullets of data sources. And so what y'all done is y'all put your own bullets in.
Yeah, of what we actually have.
Yeah.
So the measures that we actually have in place, because you said, well, I want to see this. We're like, well, we don't have that. So you're not going to get any previous data from that either. It's not going to be any benefit to
So the only thing really that's different in this document you just shared with us from the template you'd see on TASB is the bullets.
Yes.
Yeah. And that will be what we would talk to you. I mean, that's the whole process of figuring out what the relevant data that you guys track that we want to see is. So, anyway,
So is the step for us to review these and come back with comments, or are we discussing those
Dr.
now?
Chapman, what do you think the best way? I think, it'd probably be a good thing if we could find, put it on a future agenda. We don't have a whole lot of time because we need to get something rolling.
It's gonna either be December 2nd or January 13th.
And, yeah, we'd have to do one of those two meetings. But in between now and then, if board members, would it be okay for them to send you feedback?
Or you could do a subcommittee,
I was gonna say, other
We did
ones have
that.
done subcommittees.
Yeah.
and then we can, if you wanna do that, maybe I shouldn't have said.
No, subcommittee's a good idea. I'm just trying to think of putting that on people's plate over holiday season, when we've already got
You're right.
subcommittees going on other issues.
That's true.
So, I'm kind of thinking maybe it would be a good idea to come back and spend another few, to get some feedback, and then, if you could get feedback from board members
Mhm.
about your general feelings about it, specific suggestions, and then superintendent and I can tweak it some more. We can come back in and look at a copy, look at where we are in December, in a closed, but we need to go to a closed session, in an open session. And I guess we could do some revisions and send it out prior to.
Okay. Sure.
The goal is we want to, we want to have people kind of know how they're being evaluated at the beginning of the year, right?
Yeah, so, the rule is too, so when you're gonna start, we're gonna do this for 13, and we're kicking off, our annual evaluation starts in January. They need to know, they have to know what their evaluation template is.
Yeah.
So even if you did move it to January 13, we have to do it ASAP, not later on.
Is it possible, Dr. Black, to get technologically savvy here? What if this is some sort of almost, thinking about what all the kids do, an instructor that here's what questions we're asking, and then it's almost a discussion board format that we all can log into
We
on.
talked about that. Then it's open meetings act. And so now you're all communicating and you're all collaborating at the same time. So if you're putting in, we already asked that. I already went
The
through
Google Doc kind of thing.
Unfortunately. So you could do it in a committee, or you're gonna have to do it in a regular board meeting if you had that type of collaboration, because all 7 of you are now.
So we could be online, but we'd have to be sitting here.
But it doesn't
Yeah,
matter if you
okay.
do it 10,
Yeah.
she does it tomorrow, she does it
Right, we'd all have
next
to be
week.
together.
Yeah.
There's not
So
actually.
the training communications all on the same topic.
Okay.
Yeah. So.
But if you send feedback to the superintendents,
Yeah, and too, and we can go back too and look at why did they put those items in there? And the reason why that I asked the cabinet to spend some time on this is because that's the energy that they're gonna be spending for the next year. And remember, it's guided by their vision of CB 2030 and DIP. So then if we're using other different measures, then we're gonna have to figure out how, so why are we now looking at these measures instead of these measures? Does that make sense?
Mhm.
yeah.
So
Well,
that's
yeah.
why they put all of that info in there.
You want to know from the get-go, from the start.
Oh, no, you have-
What
yeah.
you're being held accountable.
Whatever template you have, we need to have it by the start of their.
Would it be too late to approve it at that January meeting?
No, we can still do it in
Because
January.
we could, if we feel like we have more time to devote to it in January, we could, that would give you and I more time to, to perfect it with some, or bring it more up to speed with some input from, individual input from board members to you. And then we could bring a more completed document, or closer to complete document to the board in January. If you like the direction this is going, if you don't like the direction it's going and you think it's getting too convoluted or complex, tell us to throw the brakes on now and we can do something different. But if you like the direction it's going, we could take some input and work on it collaboratively, and then we could come in January and hopefully have it to the point where we can approve it with specific changes. Right.
Yeah, and the reason that I would suggest that you do it in January, guys, you're gonna be filling out the current year's evaluation and bringing it to the board meeting on December 2nd. So you're already gonna be doing some homework and getting that piece done.
Yeah.
then you're gonna be doing this.
Yeah,
January's okay, so if,
yeah. I mean, if we could at least get it to the point where people looked at it and said, I like it with these 3 or 4 specific changes or additions or subtractions or deletions. You know, it's like, I feel like I'm on a dissertation committee, you know, we can sign off on it, assuming we're gonna make the edits that the group agrees to make. I feel like if you guys will, you know, pitch in with some feedback on what you see, we can get it to a point where then we can come in January and spend an hour just sort of fine tuning and wordsmithing it. One thing I would ask you guys to look real carefully at though are those board goals that are,
goal setting.
Yeah,
Number 6, the 6th section.
on the last page of the first document that Dr. Chapman gave us, because those are the ones in blue. Those are the ones that I wrote that were based on what bubbled up in our work study, those areas that bubbled up. And I left some things blank in there and left some things kind of vague. I have some X's in there because I wanted the group to weigh in on conceptually on, you know, for example, one of them is sort of around the relationship piece, student relationship piece that bubbled up. So I sort of named that student culture. But part of the problem is how do we measure that? How do we make that measurable? And the first step to making it measurable is making sure we're monitoring it and measuring it, right? And so I gave us the possibility of like making it a goal to just have the superintendent over the next year begin to monitor and collect data and then set the measurable goals for the 23 cycle, if that makes sense. So the first year would be more follow and figure out where we are and get a baseline and then set a growth goal, you know, that's appropriate from there. But maybe you get into it and you get data by the end of the first quarter and you're ready to set a goal, and we can set something more measurable, you know, for the end of the year. But I just kind of left it a little bit vague, so I'd like you guys to read those carefully and see if you think they capture the concerns that bubbled up in our work study, and just kind of get your suggestions on how we might tighten those up and improve them. Because makes sense?
Can I have some questions?
Yeah, absolutely.
Okay, so just to clarify, we're looking at the blue and we're also looking at these 4 pages. And that's what
Right.
we'll review.
Right.
I still don't have a firm grasp on the org chart. I'm just gonna be honest.
On the org chart.
Uh-huh. So when we see these areas, it would be really helpful to see the org chart related to that.
For the superintendent report? For the
Yeah,
superintendent
just so I can
evaluation?
understand, because they're listed, like it's listed who the owner is. And I'm just trying to understand the structure of it, of how it connects to all the different pieces.
So you're just focused on, so you're only focused on the superintendent. You're not focused on anybody else.
Right, but to be able to see on the superintendent side that all those areas are covered under the superintendent, I still have to see the umbrella.
So these are, okay, so that's irrelevant.
Okay,
And here's why, because these are all also based on your 5 goals. So you're staying with your 5 goals.
okay,
And that's where that comes from. So you've got finance, you got human resources, you got facilities, you've got
okay.
curriculum, and that's why the
That's
commissioner
this,
has.
this, that.
And that's why the commissioner
Got it.
has that in there, because all districts have those 5. So whether you have 13 people, you know, like a Joe Gillen, you know, she's in her CCMR, but she falls under ed leadership.
Okay,
And so that's why they're in that facet. It's not because
Got
of the people, it's because of the guiding objectives,
got it,
or goals, some districts call them.
okay.
And so then what we did, so we changed 0 wording on any of this. All we did is added the bullets on what we actually see and measure now, and then it also can correlate back to CB 2030 and DIP.
Got it, okay.
And remember, the DIP is not approved by the superintendent, it's by the DIC, and it goes straight from the DIC to the Board of Trustees.
Got
So
it.
that's by the community or stakeholders, and so that's why, and the CB 2030, your strategic 10-year plan, was also developed by your stakeholders.
Right.
And go straight to the board, not through the superintendent. And so that's why then it's the community stakeholder vision, and then it's evaluated by this document from the board of the superintendent.
Okay,
So right now, I mean, if you look at this page, the general information page, that very first paragraph, I think essentially what you've been doing, the commissioner recommends those three parts: the report on the student performance, which is the huge spreadsheet that's very confusing, that the superintendent shared with us. And then the second part is the key performance indicators. Those are the 3 measurable goals that we wrote that we're trying to write based on that work study. And then the third part is basically the rest of the evaluation, just, the basic. And that essentially is really all that we've been doing, I think, is sort of that third part. I think there were some performance measures, but they were, I think retention was one of them, but there was nothing measurable in it.
No, just comments.
Right.
Opinions.
Yeah, it was just, we do it or we don't. So this would be, this would be a much, I think, more comprehensive way. We'd make sure we're looking at seeing all the academic data, which is the most important thing, obviously. But also, and then all the, sort of I don't want to diminish it by calling it boilerplate, but, the general managerial responsibilities and leadership responsibilities that are reflected in the document, the third part. And then those tailored goals in the middle, right? And so it's a little confusing now because those 3 tailored goals have kind of been embedded in part 1 in the spreadsheet. But we could also detach them and list them separately in a part 2 if we wanted to. Sally?
Okay, so I think where I'm confused, and maybe y'all can help clarify this, I can't decide if it's that I'm tired or I just am confused. This last set of papers that we got, how are these things measurable and able to be used as an evaluation? Like, what are we planning to do with this?
That's an excellent question, because then, I mean, it's an excellent question. It just means it's part of the data and information that we're gonna give you, and it falls in under the annual discussion topics. But when you come to, you're exactly right, when it comes to a measurable, what does any of this have to do with measurable, and what is the success criteria, or what do we consider as?
Good, bad, ugly?
Yeah, and then
I
is there
think
an
that's
A?
where I was confused.
Okay, so is there an A, B, or C then? I mean, that's the commissioner
Or is that what we
evaluation.
want? Do we want ABC, or do we want, like, the one I was looking at was like SAT? Like, it just
Well,
says career, TSI scores, SAT scores, but it doesn't say like.
That's
what.
your House Bill 3 goals. So you already have all that in place with percentages coming.
Okay,
So
okay,
ignore the educational leadership ones.
okay.
It's really, and I understand where you're coming from, it's really your board and community relations. Well, how do you
Measure.
measure it?
Yeah.
So, or district management, how do you measure it? And there's not it's just, here's what we have, and here's what we're gonna try to successfully do. So it's almost showing you, here's the focus that we have under CV 2030 DIP, and this is the measures that we take to try to get there.
So
And the board's,
yeah, I'm sorry.
No, go ahead.
So when you think about that part 3, these areas are a little bit less measurable than the academic pieces, right? It's things like educational leadership, and that's the first domain. The second domain is district management, and then board and community relations. And so what those bullets are supposed to be, and we probably should provide the template that's on TASB so that they can, see just that as an example. It might help these bullets make more sense, but
they're blank.
for example, instructional management on the TASB thing, it says the superintendent manages an assessment and improvement system for student learning in the major academic subjects that results in ongoing improvement in student achievement, period. The board may want to see, and then these bullets say information on how the district determines deficiencies or areas for improvement in instruction and curriculum, an annual report of instructional areas needing attention as revealed by the system, annual reports of remediation and instructional improvement. So it's not necessarily all super measurable, but it's information.
Yeah.
it's sort of, we call it cumulative data, I guess, in education. It's information that would help, that we'd be able to look at and see what's happening and what the superintendent and team are doing in a certain area, if that makes sense.
And so, Mr. Boccic and Mr. Shackman, remember whenever y'all would, and again, I've only heard this from one board, remember the big book that you would get whenever you would do the superintendent, yeah. Well, it's gonna be that again. That's exactly, because that's what this is. And so you're gonna get this document, it's gonna be about so big, it's gonna be hundreds of pages, and that's what we're gonna give you. That's gonna have all of these measures in it. We're gonna go, here you go, and then you're gonna go, okay. So we're going back to that. And so knowing that's exactly what that's gonna be again, because it was the commissioner's full evaluation piece. That's what it is. So, and I believe I have a copy somewhere. And it's probably maybe 800, 900 pages, maybe I'm exaggerating, but it's
Probably not a page.
One evaluation, that might be.
So I think that brings up a good point, because it says in part 3, agreement is reached on which areas of part 3 items will be included. Not all are relevant to the evaluation cycle every time.
No, correct.
Yeah.
So you customize part 3.
And that's why we
determine-
came in and customized it.
Right,
So-
what things that we would be given.
And that's what we're supposed to be reviewing between
Right,
now,
but-
just to see if we want to
Yeah.
Okay.
modify.
Would those things, do you think those things would be helpful? If there's something else you think would be helpful that's not listed, and the wording in this template is, the board may want to see these things, right? And so it doesn't necessarily mean, I think, that we have to ask for everything on the list every year.
But if it's on the list,
He's gonna put it in the book for us.
and you're gonna get it, and then that then has the conversation of the quarterly reports, so then we change those out, and then it just becomes that information that is here. I mean, that's what's gonna be, 'cause the whole district's gonna focus on that, that's where we're moving. So whatever it looks like, that's where we're moving. So that's why I asked the cabinet to come up with what they're already doing, and then what makes sense, that we can continue either your quarterly report, following your CV 2030 and your DIP. Not, we need to restructure, revamp, and go backward. Not backwards, go a different direction in the,
Switch from the tollway to 75.
yeah.
So the difference between this and what we have been doing, we just have an expectation, right? And I don't have our
I have it.
document.
You want it?
If you have, yeah, you have it right in front of you. But, for example, we just have ability to enhance athletic and fine arts and facilities and experiences that result in increased student, parent, and community engagement. And then we don't have anything there that says, what might the board want to see or look at?
We didn't have anything at that time. I want to be clear, there was
Right.
nothing, we
There's
didn't
nothing to
have
look for.
any data
Yeah.
to set a baseline to say here, I mean, we were,
What do you
So,
think about this?
yeah, I mean, that's all you could do. I mean, there
This-
was no, there
this
was
one
nothing.
looks different than me.
Is it not the right one?
This one does not look like the one I've seen before, I'm sorry. Well, yeah, there's some.
It just didn't have the measures behind it, so
Yeah.
it had athletics and
I
fine
think-
art, that's just the only piece it didn't have on
Okay.
it. Because you already developed those new
The format
focuses,
was-
Yeah.
but these
That
are
is
the
one
same,
format, yeah.
same ones.
Yeah, and so, I mean, there's just some things, and there's some things on here that, it's not kind of grouped into in the, sort of the components or the domains that you would normally look for with a superintendent, like instructional leadership and district management and financial management and those sorts of things. And then there's just no, like I said, no direction there. And so that's, I don't want us to get in necessarily into the business of forcing you to do a 1,000-page book every December, but I also would like the document for us to be able to articulate to you, the superintendent, what kinds of things we would be looking for to show that growth or satisfactory performance is happening in a particular area. And again, I mean, we don't have to, it's a little bit like, the IRS, I guess. You have all your documentation ready to show, but they don't always ask for it, right? So, if we have lots of confidence just from what we've been witnessing, that something is going really well, we may not ask for a ton of additional documentation. But
But whatever's in the evaluation in January, you're gonna get that in December.
Yeah, I
Right.
think that's,
So
you're
not.
saying if it's on the list, it's
you're-
coming whether you ask
and
for
it's
it or
gonna
not.
It's gonna start,
Yeah.
we're gonna start that conversation in January for the entire district.
Right.
And so we can't in November go, I need this, this, and this. No, we've been already working on it January of 2022, ready to present December of 2022.
so maybe we need to come to some consensus on the things that you've listed here that we think would be the highest leverage.
Yeah, you don't have to do all of them. We just
Yeah.
gave, here's the things. I mean, just gave a list. And this is very rough, guys. It'll get much more cleaned up. But this is just an idea.
Yeah, it's just, I can't
Very
emphasize
So,
much, that
one
it's a starting point.
other question I have is with that, the cycle that I've seen so far is that the formative is right before the summative.
Correct. It's in your board policy. And that's in every district of it.
But,
There's no space.
Yeah, because you have a 1 year anniversary. I mean, 1 year, one is the evaluation, 2 is contract salary.
Okay,
yeah, you're thinking of formative and summative in the
Not with
educational sense.
not with teachers. Two
okay,
different things.
okay.
Yeah.
It's,
Okay, so we review, identify what priorities, maybe some measures, and send comments back. Is that what we're doing?
does that work for everybody?
Can I have the Word version so I can track changes or put comment bubbles? So I don't have to
Yeah,
tell
I
you
mean,
page
that-
1, bullet number 2, like, so you can just
Dr.
have it.
Chapman, would that be
Yeah.
okay to send,
Yeah.
send everybody out a
Absolutely.
Word version, and then you could just get some track changes, and that would make your job a lot easier too, I think.
I think so.
And then, you
I
know,
just gotta figure out how, so, okay.
breathe deeply.
Yeah, no, I'm trying to think, so if I got, if I got 20 pages here.
I know, right? No, you're not.
31. And then I got 10 here. How am I gonna, how do I do that if they're different too?
I think the key would be comment bubbles, not like track changes in the document.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Because then your comment
Yeah.
bubbles are associated to
Yeah,
that
I get
thing,
it.
or maybe it's a
We could.
question. Like I look at this one thing and I'm like, what does that even mean? So it may be more about, I need to understand
Yeah.
it more to know, that's not
And
important.
and those are gonna go into detail. Those are just bullets that they
Okay.
put down as they're doing as we speak.
Okay.
and I think, you know, when,
Yeah, I'll do that.
the final draft, the bullets would probably be there'd be a little more elaboration
Oh,
in the
yes.
bullets, yeah. The
Oh,
bullets
yeah,
are pretty
yeah.
bullety right now.
We just didn't wanna go into detail
Yeah.
and spend
Oh,
the
yeah,
energy
spend
on
tons
it
of
right
energy.
now. If this is not even where the board wanted to go. If the board even wanted to have any of those things, instead of just leaving it as the initial, all the way to step 6, which was the focus measures and House Bill 3 goals, and if that's what you want, then that's what we go with. You want
I
Well,
think
and
it's a reduction of some
all-
of these. I mean, some of the key focus, I think it's.
So, you know, also just for context,
Like this is a reduction.
when Dr. Chapman and I were
low.
first talking about this, what I really expressed to him initially was a desire just to take what we did in the work study and add the 3 performance measures, build that into the document that we currently have, and just add that in and run with that for 2022. And the more we talked about it, the more I got the feeling that you really would like to go ahead and change out.
Well, and the reason being is because
Yeah.
somewhere you're gonna have to have a baseline. I mean,
Right.
somewhere, so if we do it another year, now you're into 23-24 school year, and so either you do it and go and get in line with CV 2030 and DIP, or you're still always gonna be a year on getting a baseline, always gonna be a year.
I mean,
That's why, that's the only
I
reason.
feel pretty strongly that it would be, ultimately it would, changing the way we do this would probably be in everybody's best interest, and in the district's best interest, and in Dr. Chapman's best interest, and it would just be a more transparent way of doing things. I always believe people need to have a full, firm understanding of how they're being evaluated. And when there's a group of 7 of us doing the evaluation, it helps for us all to agree on that we're gonna be looking at the same things, right? you know, we can, it'll be a push to get this done by January. And we'll have to get, you know, everybody will have to put some thought into it and communicate with the superintendent about what they think, and we'll have to really kind of put our nose to the grindstone in December.
You know, I'm just thinking out loud, we could always do it February 11th. I know we're getting back, but you have work study, and then that gives you some time, and then your questions, and then you can all collaborate on it, and then we can have somebody scribing, and I know.
Oh, we
but
can
just
actually
can't-
work through the document
Yeah,
together.
then we just,
I like that
But
idea.
then we
I'm
need
already
to-
thinking, y'all are sending me home to come up with questions on a document that I
That's what I'm
can't
afraid
even
of.
read. Like,
Yeah,
I don't
yeah.
even know what's happening.
we could, it's just, but we gotta get it done.
Okay,
We gotta
so
get it
let's
done.
do this. Let's let us let's, if you can give any feedback, please do. If it's still skeletal or vague enough that you're having a hard time giving feedback, then that's okay. But we'll try to clean it up further and make it, you know, have it ready to sort of present and be in a shape where we really can take time in the you know, in the January meeting to actually wordsmith it, and then if it's not too late to put it in, to approve it at the February meeting, then we can.
I think he was saying that we would wordsmith it at the February work
Work study.
study. We
Oh,
would do
instead
it
of January.
collaboratively.
Then you have 3 hours, or you can do it 2 hours.
Okay,
I don't know, I'm just,
okay,
I think that's gonna help.
okay, let's do that. Okay, I'm sorry, I misunderstood. So just push the whole thing back to the February work
I mean,
study.
I still like the idea, if you can provide feedback now, provide it.
Yeah,
Because you
I
get
can
time
tell
to
you
think.
right now, I think I'm gonna need extra help
yeah.
on this. And then we can all sit down together and finalize it in February.
Yeah.
And then we can have the whole cabinet here, and they can explain the whys behind the bullets once we elaborate on them too. I think that's probably smart.
Yeah.
That's
Yeah.
probably smart.
Is that a workable alternative for everyone? All right, well, let's do that then. Let's do that.
Comfortable with that?
Again, it's kind of messy work, and it can feel kind of overwhelming, especially when you look at this commissioner's data report.
And just know we fill that out annually, every year.
But y'all are doing that whether we ask for it or not.
Whether you ask for it or not.
So we might as well take a look at it.
But no, there's no plus or minuses this year.
Right.
And there won't be for 23 years either. 22,
Okay.
23.
Well, any other comments or questions?
Thank you guys for the work to move this forward.
Okay, well, let me see if I can,
Don't work out.
Watch out.
let's see if I can find the agenda.
Corvettes, just understand.
Yeah.
They have some gratitude.
All right. Anything else, ladies and gentlemen, on this matter before we move to agenda item 7, which is adjournment? Okay, we've reached the end of our this special call meeting. We are adjourned at 8:39 p.m.